The terminal lights flickered like a heartbeat, each pulse stretching seconds into what felt like eternities. Amara Solis stood at gate 42, her sleek uniform perfectly in place, cap pulled low, eyes scanning the holographic boarding display that shimmered faintly under the neon glow. Around her, travelers shuffled impatiently, their faces caught between curiosity and irritation, unaware that they were about to witness a moment that would etch itself into the station's history. "You can't board," said the gate agent, his tone laced with authority and something sharper, something unspoken that hinted at disdain. "This isn't for people like you." Amara's hands clenched lightly at her sides, not from fear, but from a simmering awareness that the world rarely recognized those who were quiet, diligent, and unseen. He saw a junior engineer, someone he assumed powerless, someone who belonged in line. But he was wrong. Very wrong. She took a slow breath, letting the cold, recycled air of the terminal settle into her lungs. The faint scent of ozone from the nearby docking shuttles mixed with the tang of recycled coffee and metal polish, a smell that always reminded her of how far she had come and how far she had yet to rise. Around them, people whispered, uncertain whether to intervene, their hesitation a quiet testament to the unspoken rules of civility in this fractured society. Amara's gaze drifted over the holographic boarding list, her fingers flexing against the thin, reinforced gloves she always wore. Her name didn't appear because she didn't need it to. The codes, the overrides, the authority embedded in the station's systems were hers. Though none of these were visible, none of these were known. She had learned long ago that patience was a weapon more effective than rage, and that control was always far sweeter when it arrived silently, without fanfare. The gate agent's smirk widened, an expression of casual contempt that had fueled countless confrontations across the station. "You'll need proper clearance," he said, pressing the small button at his terminal. "Security will handle this." The soft hum of the gate's energy field shifted. Lights flickered with a subtle but noticeable stutter. The passengers tensed, murmuring amongst themselves, sensing the subtle but growing tension, though none could have guessed that the person standing calmly before them held the very power over the spaceport that he believed controlled her. Amara's mind moved through sequences faster than the blinking lights. Years of preparation, quiet study, and the meticulous accumulation of authority all converged in this single, unremarkable terminal. She felt the familiar thrill of anticipation as she realized this was the moment the world would finally recognize her truth, not as a subordinate, but as the one who had always been in control. The gate agent leaned closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I said you can't board. You're wasting my time." His arrogance was a palpable force, thick in the recycled air, as if he could shape reality simply by decree. He had no idea that reality, as he understood it, was already slipping from his grasp. Amara lifted her gloved hand slowly, as if adjusting her sleeve, and touched the console. The holographic interface shimmered in response to her presence, an invisible recognition of authority that only her credentials could invoke. The boarding barriers hummed softly, then clicked as they lowered slightly, a subtle but unmistakable shift. A small display flashed, "Override authorized, master protocol engaged." The gate agent froze. His fingers hovered over his own console, unsure whether to press buttons, call security, or simply retreat. What is this?" he muttered, almost inaudibly. Amara didn't respond. She let the silence speak, letting it carry the weight of years of overlooked authority and subtle, invisible power. Slowly, deliberately, she began walking down the central aisle of the gate. Her steps were measured, controlled, deliberate. Each movement rippled through the station like the quiet tremor of an approaching storm. Passengers turned to watch. Their eyes widened as holographic boarding displays flickered, then shifted, now clearly reflecting her authorization. Every gate, every shuttle manifest, every minor protocol that had kept the station humming under bureaucratic oversight now bent silently, obediently, to her will. The agent's expression faltered. Recognition dawned in his eyes, but far too late. He had believed in control, in the hierarchy that never acknowledged those who worked in shadows. He had not anticipated that the quiet ones, the unnoticed, often held the keys to the very systems that governed the lives of others. Her lips curved into a small, controlled smile. "You underestimated me," she said softly, letting the words hang like a blade in the air. "And that was your mistake." The air shimmered with the subtle pulse of the station's power grid responding to her command. Security drones shifted, boarding holograms realigned, and every terminal acknowledged her presence. The once hostile, arrogant agent now seemed a relic in a museum, frozen in disbelief, powerless against the invisible authority she wielded with such casual grace. Amara's eyes scanned the terminal, noting the reactions of the passengers. Some gasped, some whispered to one another, and some simply stared, frozen in awe. No one had expected the sudden shift in power, the instantaneous reversal of control. And in that quiet, cinematic moment, she understood the profound satisfaction of justice realized, not through confrontation, not through anger, but through precision, patience, and knowledge. He tried to regain control, hands shaking as he pressed buttons that now ignored his inputs entirely. Panic began to crawl into his voice as he called out, "Security! Someone fix this! She's not authorized." Her hand hovered over another console. With a single gesture, every gate displayed her signature credentials. Every boarding authorization now bore her imprimatur. The terminal's energy hummed, responding as if alive, every system attuned to her presence. The agent's protests became meaningless noise against the tide of authority she had summoned silently, invisibly wielding the power she had quietly claimed over years of meticulous planning. The hum of the terminal grew louder, a soft, steady crescendo that filled the space between hearts, a tangible acknowledgement of her presence. Security drones hovered at attention but no longer moved against her. They existed now as instruments of her control. Every manifest, every protocol, every electronic barrier was hers to command, bending to her will like obedient servants. The passengers, realizing the shift, began murmuring amongst themselves. Some whispered words of awe, some of disbelief. All eyes were drawn to her, the figure who had been invisible, underestimated, dismissed, and now stood unmistakably at the center of a storm she alone had orchestrated. The agent's face drained of color. Every attempt to assert authority, every gesture of dominance, crumbled silently around him. The system recognized her as the station's true controller, an invisible hand that had guided every sequence of operations since before his arrival. And in that realization, he understood the cost of ignorance, the weight of underestimating someone who moves quietly, deliberately, in possession of power unseen. Amara walked past him, her movements fluid, a silent symphony of command. The terminal seemed to hum with a life of its own, responding to her presence, reflecting her control in the subtle adjustments of lights, holograms, and energy fields. She reached the central hub and paused, letting the passengers see, hear, and feel the authority she carried without ostentation, without haste, without fear. Finally, the agent was escorted from the terminal, his protests fading into a quiet, impotent echo. The passengers now moved freely, guided by her commands, unaware that the balance of power had shifted completely, invisibly, irrevocably. Amara paused, her gaze sweeping across the terminal, taking in the subtle, odd reactions of those around her. A single tear traced a line down her cheek, not from triumph, but from the quiet, profound satisfaction of justice realized. Years of preparation, patience, and silent endurance had culminated in this single, cinematic, unstoppable moment. And then she walked toward her shuttle. The station itself seemed to whisper her name in recognition. She was no longer the overlooked engineer, the quiet subordinate. She was the spaceport, the authority, the reckoning. She had claimed what had always been hers. In the silence left behind, the terminal hummed a steady, unwavering note, a reminder that power, patience, and knowledge are never invisible. They simply wait. And for those who doubted, underestimated, or dismissed her, the world would never again be the same.